Hello and welcome back to our brief history of computer animation. Last time we saw early computer animated television, so Scanimate, Brilliance, and the Money for Nothing video. Today we are continuing with a look at CG TV from the 1990s. Very excited for this. Now a quick preface, we will not be including VeggieTales here, as during this time it was direct-to-video, but we will be covering it later this season, so stay tuned. Also, to reiterate, this is not meant to be exhaustive. I am no expert. I'm into these aesthetically, so feel free to correct and chime in if I miss something that is important to you, or just if you have something to add. So with that out of the way, let's head back to the 90s. As we saw last time, early on, CGI was used on television mainly for network graphics, so bumpers, promos, that sort of thing. Of course, also advertising, commercials. We looked at work from PDI, Pacific Data Images. They were an industry leader and would continue to be throughout the 1990s. Early in the decade, morphing was all the rage. This was the process of transitioning between two images that had traditionally been done using cross-dissolve or stop-motion techniques. An algorithm developed by Thaddeus Baer and Sean Neely was used by PDI to create the more natural morphs featured in their commercial work, seen famously in a series of Exxon spots that saw cars transforming into tigers. PDI's clients included some of America's most well-known brands, Ford, Budweiser, Coke, to name a few. They were also responsible for bringing one of advertising's most iconic characters, the Pillsbury Doughboy, into the future. Pillsbury was actually the first brand to move their mascot to CG in the early 90s. Previously, it had been animated with stop motion. PDI was founded with the aim of creating entertainment using 3D computer animation. When they weren't producing commercials, PDI staff worked on short narrative or character animations. Already, I'm sure you can see progress in terms of expressiveness and fluidity with these characters compared to those that appeared just a few years earlier. In 1995, PDI was contracted by the producers of The Simpsons to create a segment for their annual Trios of Horror Halloween episode. While its popularity had definitely peaked, The Simpsons was arguably at its creative best in 1995. This was the year that gave us Who Shot Mr. Burns, Mother Simpson, and Marge Be Not Proud, among many other classic episodes and moments. But yeah, Homer Cubed. This segment found Homer wandering into a portal that transports him into a three-dimensional world. He accidentally tears a hole in this dimension, and his friends and family mount a rescue effort, leading to Bart's entering the dimension just as Homer is seemingly sucked into our world. It was directed by Bob Anderson, with the computer animated scenes directed by PDI's Tim Johnson. Johnson had co-founded the company's character animation group. Actually, he was responsible for the Pillsbury Doughboy we saw earlier. Unlike the Doughboy, who had been rendered three-dimensionally for decades, Homer Cubed presented the challenge of converting, more or less, the Simpsons characters from 2D to 3D. To give PDI something to work off of, Homer Cubed was storyboarded just like any other episode, so 2D. Bart's hair was apparently a struggle. They had to use vinyl dolls as reference, but ultimately, I think, they did an amazing job adapting these characters to 3D while staying true to the established traits and mannerisms. For context, in the larger history, this was a month or so before the release of Toy Story. As we are about to see, other 3D animated characters were appearing on television around this time, but none were as expressive as this. Belgian cartoonist Francois Scoyton was the son of architects. Some of their work clearly rubbed off on him, as can be seen in his most well-known series, Cities of the Fantastic. First published in 1983, this imagined fictional civilizations, each with their own unique architecture, inspired by historic or speculative design. In 1990, Scoyton collaborated with new media artist Maurice Benayoun to produce one of the first fully computer-animated TV series, QUARXS. In this, a cryptobiologist profiles a bizarre and invisible species known as the QUARXS. They vary in appearance and ability. Some look like caterpillars, others are just shapes, or patterns, energies, even. Each episode is seen from the POV of the cryptobiologist's detectors, while he narrates, explaining what each QUARXS can do, be it copying art or moving through matter. Apparently, there was a planned 100 3-minute episodes, but there were only 12 produced between 1990 and 1993. These would air, I believe, on Canal+, a French premium channel, and possibly France 3, French public television. Over in America, animation was experiencing a boom period, both theatrically, the Disney Renaissance, and on television throughout the 1990s. We've covered this pretty extensively, including Cartoon Network's first original series, The Moxie Show. Very little survives, but this was an anthology series that featured classic cartoons packaged around CG segments starring a dog, Moxie, and a flea. Now, the casting here is wild. Moxie is voiced by Bobcat Goldthwait, and at different times, both Penn Jillette and Chris Rock voice Flea. Moxie was brought to life thanks to motion capture technology and has the unique honor of being the first cartoon to air quote-unquote live thanks to appearing during the great international Toon-In. This was a massive marathon that spanned 3 Turner networks in America, so TBS, TNT, and Cartoon Network, as well as 3 other international affiliates in Latin America and Europe. Overall, I believe it was something like 55 countries tuned in. On November 26, 1993, this was the world's introduction to Moxie, with a puppeteer providing body movements, a technician manipulating facial expressions, and Bobcat interacting with children, all in real time. The Moxie show debuted the following December and ran until 1995, but was not well preserved, or preserved at all, and has not aired since 1996. Last time, we saw the video for Dire Straits' Money for Nothing, which featured animation produced by Gavin Blair and Ian Pearson, who also created animation for Def Leppard's Let's Get Rocked in 1992. The previous year, they, along with Christopher Brough, Phil Mitchell, and John Grace, had formed what is today known as Mainframe Studios in Vancouver. This was obviously set up to create 3D computer animation. Their first major project, ReBoot, was a massive undertaking. We have seen what came before it, and to produce a full series animated with computers just wasn't possible, not with the technology available when the idea was first thought of. ReBoot's roots date back to 1984, when it was conceived by Blair, Mitchell, Pearson, and Grace, then known collectively as the Hub. It was in development for many years, but in the early 90s, the tech had begun to catch up with their ambitions. This is still before Toy Story, and there wasn't anything they could really point to and say to a TV exec or networks that, this show is going to be like blank. There just wasn't anything like this before. The setting and themes would become an extension of the concept. It was made with computers, and so it took place inside them as well. Presenting it as such not only covered some of the animation limitations, simple backgrounds and clunky movements, but also helped people adjust to these new aesthetics. ReBoot was the product of the information age. The internet and computers even were still new to many people. This is what the internet looked like around that time, but still, the possibilities felt endless. Episode plots would revolve around Bob, Enzo, and Dot protecting the computer system / city mainframe from the villains, viruses, Megabyte, and Hexadecimal. It premiered on ABC in the US and cable network YTV here in Canada in September 1994 and would run into the new millennium, November 2001. Mainframe Studios followed ReBoot with Beast Wars, a sequel to Transformers, the wildly popular cartoon and toy line from the 1980s. The original Transformers series, as well as the toy line, had recently been repackaged in 1992 as Transformers Generation 2, or G2. Worth mentioning because the only new animation in the G2 animated series was the inclusion of some CGI used in the opening and scene transitions, but this was largely abandoned with the arrival of Beast Wars. Debuting in 1996, Beast Wars took place in the future of the Transformers universe, with the descendants of the good Autobots, here known as the Maximals, continuing their battle against the evil Decepticons, now the Predacons. Rather than vehicles, the robots turn into different animals, obviously, Beast Wars. This ran until 1999 and spawned its own sequel, Beast Machines, running from that year only through 2000. Canadian studio Nelvana should be familiar to most animation fans. dating all the way back to the 70s with their work on the Star Wars Holiday Special, to Babar Beetlejuice, Clone High, which came a little after this period. Nelvana has produced a ton of shows. In the late 90s, they ventured into CGI with Roly Poly Oly and Donkey Kong Country. Donkey Kong Country, DKC, was based off of the popular video game of the same name that reimagined the classic video game character, Donkey Kong, placing him in a new setting, genre, and surrounding him with new characters, friends, and family. As a fun aside, the game, Donkey Kong Country, is notable for being one of the first to include pre-rendered graphics. This allowed the developers to present detailed 3D images on technology that ordinarily would not be able to produce such images. Perhaps this is why it was chosen, rather than more familiar Nintendo properties like Mario, to be adapted into a computer animated series. This show was a co-production between Nelvana, Media Lab Studio LA out of France, and the Taiwanese American studio, Hongguang. As such, it had a complicated release schedule. It was first debuted in France on France 2 in 1996. The French version premiered in Canada on Teletoon in September 97, with the English version coming there the following month. Americans would get it on various Fox networks in 1998, being based on a Japanese property. It also aired there in 1999. I'll actually link the theme in the description. It's a banger. Check it out. There are a lot of mixed feelings around this show. Personally, I have a ton of nostalgia for it, but see where a lot of the criticism comes from. The aesthetics aren't for everyone. Gamers are not the easiest audience to please, and it tried to do a lot with new technology. What is unique about DKC is it is the first fully CG show to be produced with mocap, which may explain some of the jilted movement. Now, most of what we have looked at here has almost been exclusively geared towards children. There were some computer animated shows geared towards adults made during this time. South Park, of course, which we have a whole video on, that was produced using computers. There was also Cita's World. Cita was a CG VJ who would introduce music videos during a 60-minute block on BET. In between the videos, Cita would riff on current events and answer requests or viewer mail, talk about her personal life, dating, that sort of thing. Like Moxie, Cita was created using motion capture, with Kelly Troy, also known as Kitty Kaboom, providing her voice. Cita's World was directed by Corey Turner and written by Tracy Z. Zinzer. As far as I've been able to find, the animation was produced by a company called Mirage Quest Media, and this ran from 1999 to 2003. This period was the last where computer animation would be treated as novel. After this, it just became industry standard, which we will look at more next time. That's it for today. I know there was a ton I missed, so again, please feel free to comment down below if there was something you wish I included, or if you have a correction. I always welcome being corrected. If you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, and check out some of the other videos in the series. We have another edition of Simpsons Obscura available over on Patreon, looking at obscure media featuring The Simpsons. $5 a month gets you access to that, as well as Century of Schlock, our trip through a century of cartoon smut and adult animation. None of our videos are monetized. We are 100% viewer supported, so if you have the means, please consider becoming a patron, patreon.com/pixandportraits. As always, thank you so much for your interest in this channel, and thanks for watching. Stay safe out there.